I've always loved the idea of official state symbols. It's just a great way to show off multiple aspects of your home state, like its culture, food, fossils, flora, animals, and a whole lot more. One thing you may or may not be aware of is that several states have official state firearms that represent either a historical relevance, cultural relevance, or both. Now that list is very short for political reasons, but let's just ignore that and let Wubba Bubba fill in the rest of the gaps for you guys by giving every single state a firearm to call its own. Before I begin this long video, let me just say the obvious. This is just a fun thought experiment, and my criteria for what qualifies as an official state firearm is based on what my gut says alongside history, culture, geography, pop culture, and also what my viewers think, because I did ask them in a community post like 3 or 4 months ago. So if you were looking for a peer-reviewed, very realistic, no shenanigans video, you've come to the wrong place. But if that's not you, kick back and relax while I go over all the official and unofficial firearms of every state in the United States of America. I decided we're going to go in alphabetical order, so that means we're starting off with Alabama. Alabama is that one state you honestly forget is an actual state and not a punchline for every redneck joke ever. So Alabamians, why not embrace that moniker by making your state firearm the Kimber 1911, which I think is a perfect representation of that rural, laid-back fun like harvesting small game for a mystery meat stew or plinking empty Miller Lite cans with the family. The 1911 in of itself has always been an American icon in my eyes since, you know, my 2 world wars. So it's kind of fitting to me that it represents a state that some call the heart of America. Oh wait, I think it's called something else I can't say. I was originally going to go with the Ruger 1022 for Alabama, but this resident convinced me otherwise. Moving on, I bet when I mentioned several states already had an official state firearm, some of you probably guessed Alaska was on that list, and you'd be correct. And the weapon that officially represents Alaska is the Winchester Model 70. Senate Bill 175 was signed into law on July 30th, 2014, which cemented the pre-1964 Winchester Model 70 as the official state bolt-action rifle. The bill itself actually gives us a pretty decent backstory, so let me read it for you guys real quick. Legislative findings. To be an Alaskan during the period 1930 to 1963 meant carrying the rifleman's rifle, the Winchester pre-1964 Model 70. This was the bolt-action rifle that helped Alaska men and women establish a firm foothold in the untamed and often wild Alaska wilderness. Because of the historical significance, the legislature selects the Winchester pre-1964 Model 70 as the official state bolt-action rifle. Next up is Arizona. Arizona is yet another state with an official state firearm, which is the Colt Single Action Army, the primary sidearm of the US Army, beginning in 1873, and was the quintessential Wild West handgun. The Peacemaker's reliability, accuracy, and knockdown power were so influential, its success was copied by other manufacturers for their own designs, forever changing the revolver as we know it. Despite its century-old design, it's arguably just as popular now as it was back in the day, with a myriad of replicas on the market. I mean, there really isn't much else to say. It's just a perfect representation of Arizona's rich history during that era. Moving on, Arkansas was my first roadblock in nominating an official firearm for a state that doesn't have one. So it required me to think a little bit outside of the box, and while researching for a perfect candidate, I came across one company that some of you may or may not consider a firearm company at all. Daisy Outdoor Products has been an Arkansas-based company since 1958 and produces the most well-known BB gun of all time, the Red Ryder BB gun. The Red Ryder is that stepping stone to introduce younger family members into the world of firearm ownership with something that isn't intimidating, loud, or boring. However, it's not an object you want to horse around with like a toy, which makes it a great tool to teach your kids the 4 rules of safety for firearms and other safety tips. For those exact reasons, I see no other option but to nominate the Red Ryder BB gun as the official firearm of Arkansas. Next up is the state of California. There were a lot of angles for me to look for my nominee, like historical value, Hollywood presence, or maybe a gun that Californians can actually purchase. But only 2 minutes into my brainstorming session, I conjured up my candidate, the Winchester 1887. I chose it solely based on one reason: Terminator 2. It doesn't take a Cyberdyne employee to tell you that Terminator 2 is one of the best action movies of all time, and the setting of early 90s California is unforgettable. The model 1887 is front center for most of its memorable action scenes, forever changing pop culture and embedding it as one of the most famous Hollywood firearms ever. Lastly, as an added bonus, it's an actual firearm you can own in the state of California, since it's just a lever action shotgun. But then again, good luck affording one that isn't a replica. Next state on the list is Colorado, the poster child of the Rocky Mountains, due to it having the highest peaks and the most touristy of towns. But for the sake of finding a candidate, let's focus more on the former, as my gut wants the official firearm to be a type of lightweight rifle to hunt or defend your private domicile in the rugged boonies. And I think I have the perfect candidate, the Steyr Scout. The Steyr Scout was created based on direct input by Jeff Cooper, one of the founding fathers of the Scout rifle concept. The Scout rifle concept is essentially a lightweight, bolt-action rifle chambered in .308, having a barrel length hovering around 19 inches, and a myriad of other little things. With these qualities, the Steyr Scout makes tackling the Rocky Mountains all the easier, without compromising your stopping power or your spine, which is why I think it deserves its nomination for Colorado's official state firearm. For the next state, we have to go all the way to the East Coast, to the state of Connecticut. Choosing Connecticut's state firearm was a very simple ordeal. The Mossberg 500 series of shotguns has stood the test of time as America's most reliable shotgun, and a very popular one too. Now don't get me wrong, I love the Remington 870 of the past, and it's debatably just as good or better depending on who you ask. It's just the modern quality control of Remington is very shoddy for obvious reasons. But back on topic, the Mossberg 500 was introduced in 1961 and was manufactured in Mossberg's home state of Connecticut for quite a few decades, though the production of the 500 has been shifting further away from Connecticut for some time. Its impact is way too profound to ignore, and I'll proudly die on this hill that this gun deserves to be recognized as the official firearm of Connecticut. Historically known as the first state, Delaware's current predicament as a very bland state is a bit sad. We should give props to Joe Biden for helping us remember Connecticut exists, though he himself is a little bland. But one thing not vanilla about Joe Biden is that he's an official Olympia gang member. He doesn't mess with that M14 nonsense.
So Jill, if there's ever a problem, just walk out on the balcony here, or walk out, put that double barrel shotgun and fire 2 blasts outside the house.
So with Joe Biden's affinity for double-barreled shotguns in mind, I designate the Beretta 682 as Delaware's official state firearm. Okay, let's move on to a more intriguing state to talk about, Florida. First thing that comes to mind when I hear Florida is gators, beaches, Disney, and controlled substances. That last thing especially seems to be a household favorite of Florida-based firearm manufacturer Kel-Tec. And it just so happens that my official pick for Florida is the Kel-Tec KSG 12 gauge. The KSG has it all: an iconic silhouette, 14+1 capacity, patented Kel-Tec wonky design, and I could 100% believe Tony Montana would buy one of these things. A wacky gun for a wacky state. The next state on the chopping block is a state that has a decent amount of domestic firearm manufacturers, Georgia. I was originally going to go with a Daniel Defense DDM4 as Georgia's official firearm, but I decided to go with the Glock 19 for a couple of reasons. Well, number one, Glock has started to crank out a lot more US manufactured Glocks from its factory located in Smyrna, Georgia. Number two, the Glock 19 is that classic jack-of-all-trades pistol. From everyday carry to being exclusively a nightstand gun, it's a pretty safe and popular choice in a lot of situations. And lastly, number three, people would be extremely pissed if I didn't put the Glock 19 somewhere in this video. I do know there is a bit of Glock fatigue nowadays because it is a bit of a boring choice, but it is a safe choice nonetheless for millions of Americans and Georgians. For my next state, I was going to nominate a spear or something like that, because Hawaii's current gun culture is going the way of the dodo because the state legislators and courts know it can get away with passing or upholding dogshit legislation while the Supreme Court sits around with a gigantic thumb up their asses that would make an ogre blush. Gun control spurging aside, this is another state where I had to exclusively look through a historical lens to come up with an answer. And I got my answer real quick. the Browning M2 machine gun. The Browning M2 was the souped-up 50 cal replacement of the Browning M1919 machine gun, both of which were designed by the legendary John Moses Browning. The M2 began production in 1933 and has been through decades of warfare. It was just about slapped onto any soldier's hands or vehicle you can imagine. And this varied use of the Browning M2 was shown off none the better than the surprise attack on Pearl Harbor. The Browning was used on land, in the air, and at sea to repel the Japanese onslaught. The M2 Browning's legendary status as one of the most prominent machine guns of the 20th century should be recognized by making it Hawaii's official state firearm. Okay, next state up on this video is actually my home state of Idaho. While editing this video, I've come to find out that on election day this year, Idahoans will be presented a ballot question that will decide what our official state firearm shall be. And I'm sad to report the potato cannon isn't an option, but the 6 candidates to choose from are pretty solid, those candidates being the Winchester Model 1894, the Winchester Model 1873, the Colt Single Action Army, the M1 Garand rifle, the Colt M1911, and lastly, the Remington Model 700. Not really going to go in depth with each one of these weapons because I have a feeling we might see most of these later on in the video, but if it was up to me, I'd either go with the Model 1873 or the M1 Garand. I'm more leaning towards the M1 Garand just based on the fact that we may never get a second chance for it to become a state symbol, while the Winchester Model 1873 has a decent chance for a handful of states based on the fact that it's the gun that won the West. Either way, it's about damn time my Jemmy state got an official state firearm. For the next state, I want to get this out of the way. No, the official gun of Illinois isn't a switched up Glock 17 with ETS mags, and it sure as hell isn't an AR pistol lubed up with Dr. Pepper. But my commenter's silliness isn't very far off from my pick, as I picked the Chicago typewriter to be the state's official firearm. The Thompson machine gun is just synonymous with the history of Prohibition and the presence of organized mobs in the Windy City. Now I realize this pick would be overwhelmingly controversial in politics due to the pretty historic crimes tied to it, but I'd just be lying if I didn't say this felt like the right choice. And come on, we have Titanic inflatable slides, and barely anyone clutches their pearls over this. So acknowledging a certain firearm being core to your state's rich history of organized crime while not endorsing said crimes shouldn't be too controversial to everyday Americans. Well, besides politicians, because they'll flip their lid over anything. Moving one state east from Illinois, Indiana already has a state firearm to call its own since 2012, the Grouseland rifle. Created by resident Hoosier Colonel John Small in the early 1800s, the Grouseland rifle is a simple percussion rifle that was converted from black powder with very few in existence. The rifle itself isn't very interesting to be honest, but it being designed by John Small does most of the heavy lifting, and it potentially being used by William Clark make it a pretty intriguing choice for Indiana's official firearm. If you want to gaze upon the Grouseland rifle in person, there's one permanently housed at William Henry Harrison's mansion in the city of Vincennes, Indiana, so go give it a peek if it interests you. Iowa. Iowans, I'm sorry, I really did try to come up with a unique firearm to represent you guys all by myself. Not really helping as you're probably the least notable flyover state. The only reason I'm reminded that you guys exist is that you guys have the largest truck stop in the world that I really want to visit. But fear not for my originality, one of your own citizens came in clutch with a suggestion. The Henry Golden Boy. I mean, it makes sense to me. The terrain can be a bit mundane at times, and you're literally in the middle of nowhere. So why not plink some cans with such a sophisticated, economically chambered, cool rifle? Plus, one of Iowa's more famous residents in the online gun world, Honest Outlaw, loves the Golden Boy for the exact reasons I just went over. So now it's settled. The Henry Golden Boy should be the official firearm of Iowa. Speaking of flyover states, we got another one to cover. Kansas. For the state of Kansas, I decided the Sharps rifle would be a good candidate. Designed by Christian Sharps in 1848 and being manufactured for around 30 years, this single-shot falling block rifle platform has had a lot of history of usage in the latter half of the 19th century. It was a popular choice in the Wild West, but most importantly, it did see a decent chunk of action in the United States military especially in Kansas, with several skirmishes between American troops and natives. It was also notably used by abolitionists during Bleeding Kansas and guerrilla warfare in Kansas during the American Civil War, which in my mind just further cements the Sharps rifle as a decent choice to represent Kansas. Okay, next up I'm actually killing two birds with one stone, because both Kentucky and Pennsylvania have very similar and almost exact official state firearms. The Kentucky and Pennsylvania long rifles are a variety of muzzleloaders that were used for around 100 plus years in many aspects of American history. These rifles were produced by German and Swiss immigrants who settled in Pennsylvania in the early 1700s, and over the years the manufacturing of this weapon was spread to other states, including Kentucky. From the Revolutionary War to hunting, the long rifle was a popular choice due to its long barrel that was pretty darn accurate compared to other guns on the market at the time, and being domestically made was an added bonus. Overall, I can quite confidently say that legislators of both Kentucky and Pennsylvania picked a pretty fitting gun to represent their states. Moving on, all I can really think of when I hear the word Louisiana is swamp. So now I have an excuse to nominate a firearm relating to America's second favorite game to hunt: waterfowl. Louisiana waterfowl seasons are pretty decent from what I've heard, due to its geography and expansive swamp biome. So nominating a popular semi-auto shotgun for Louisiana is a no-brainer. With that in mind, the Beretta A300 came to my head pretty quickly due to its popularity, numerous models, reliability over the years, and for the most part, a great value. So with that in mind, I think the A300 will slot in pretty well as the Swamp State's official firearm. Okay, time to move along to the state of Maine, home of lobsters, lighthouses, vast wilderness, and annoying tourists from Prince Edward Island. Since New York is semi-close and Remington is historically tied to New England, I feel like it's fitting to nominate the Remington 700 for Maine. For a lot of people, the Remington 700 is seen as the classic bolt-action rifle that's been in the hands of soldiers and civilians around the world for decades. If you get the right caliber, I see it as the perfect hunting rifle for Maine's wild moose population. I can also imagine lugging this around the rugged shores of Maine. Yeah, just like the 870, this gun has seen better days. But in my opinion, Remington's last 20 years shouldn't displace its solid performance in the years of old. I hope you Mainers agree with me on this pick. Next state up is Maryland. Maryland currently doesn't have any notable firearm manufacturers within its borders, though this hasn't always been the case. Beretta USA used to call Accokeet, Maryland home, and they used to manufacture a couple firearms there. And from there, it was really easy to pick the Beretta M9 out of the litter to represent Maryland. The Beretta M9 was the official US military pistol from 1985 to around 2017. It's a pretty standard double-action, single-action pistol that was economically viable and reliable enough for the US military to hand them out like hotcakes for several decades. For the most part, the Beretta M9 was a pretty solid service pistol. That is until parts wore off with heavy use and a significant amount of servicemen came to despise it for a variety of reasons. However, over the years and through several iterations, it's a bona fide reliable classic that keeps popping up in the civilian and military markets around the world to this day. Massachusetts, in my opinion, is another boring modern state with terrible gun laws, making it hard to pick a gun through a modern lens. However, Massachusetts from the past is a completely different story and guided me towards my pick of the state. A lot of historic events unfolded before and during the founding of our country. Examples like the Boston Massacre, the Boston Tea Party, the shot heard around the world, really felt like the center stage during the beginning of our nation. Even during the Civil War, where the state is geographically somewhat distant from the action, the presence of Massachusetts could be felt, politically and physically. With the latter, I'm not just talking about boots on the ground. I'm talking about a specific firearm given to the Union soldiers from the Bay State. The Springfield Model 1861 was easily mass-produced, more accurate thanks to its rifling, cheaper to produce than previous rifled muskets, and it was more reliable than its smoothbore predecessors. I think you guys get the picture now of how influential this gun was during the Civil War, and why Massachusetts should hypothetically make this their own official firearm. Moving on to the state of Michigan, Michigan hasn't really had too many notable firearms manufactured there, besides sporterized M1 carbines back in the day, so it looks like it's time again to check in to see what my viewers from Michigan say. Trevor Shark 16 says, Michigan nowadays would be an unregistered 3rd gen Glock 17 with questionable modifications. I think the massive amount of lead at the bottom of suburban ponds would agree with you. And honestly, the Glock 17 is a bit overlooked nowadays, as a lot of people lean towards the slightly smaller Glock 19. However, back in the early 1980s when it was first introduced to the military and police world, this singular pistol changed everything. From its polymer design, double-stack magazines, reliability, cost-effectiveness, every pistol nowadays apes the Glock for better and for worse. But some of you may be asking, how does the Glock 17 tie into Michigan specifically? Well, for some reason, I've always associated Michigan as kind of the police capital of the United States for no particular reason. Okay, well, maybe a couple reasons. And the Glock 17 is a pretty common sidearm for law enforcement. So in that aspect, I think it's a perfect candidate for Michigan's official state firearm. Ah, Minnesota, land of the fraud. So of course I'm picking the biggest lineup of frauds to represent the state of Minnesota, Turkish shotguns. A lot of you think I'm beating a dead horse when I dunk on these terrible Turkish shotguns. Well, I'd argue I'm not doing it enough. A couple months ago, I went into a gun store with some family friends, and one of them was enamored at the sight of a Turkish bullpup shotgun, and I had to sadly tell him that there's a reason why they're selling it very cheap. At best, these Turkish shotguns are range toys, and at worst, they're time bombs. So for you Minnesotans, you get what you deserve. The Turkish shotgun is your official state firearm. Oh, okay, I'm just messing with you guys. I'll give Minnesotans an actually cool firearm to call your own. And that firearm I ended up choosing was the Desert Eagle, because it's actually produced in the Thousand Lakes state. I think everyone who's watching this video knows what the Desert Eagle is, but something you may or may not know is that the reliability of this gun is kind of terrible. But I really don't think anyone buys a Desert Eagle for practicality, they buy it for the cool factor. Though even that can be a little bit misplaced too, since some of the colors available look goofy in my opinion. I would personally stick with a stainless steel finish. But most importantly, despite Minnesota having mediocre gun laws, it's actually still legal to purchase one of these bad boys in the state, so the clock is ticking Minnesotans to go snag my pick for Minnesota. Next state we have on our hands is Mississippi, yet another rural swamp state, so great time to break out some of my community suggestions. Terry Bernardino 69 suggests, Mississippi will have the Draco. Okay, this is like the 3rd or 4th time I saw someone bring up the Draco. Well, since my brain is smoothing over with nothing else to come in mind, I might as well go with the Draco. For the few who want a quick overview of this gun that sounds like a wizard's name, the Draco is a Romanian AK pistol commonly imported to the United States or produced domestically by the likes of Century Arms. Over the years, the Draco has kind of retained a mixed reputation, mainly thanks to 2 reasons. Reason number 1 is Century Arms is missing a quality assurance team, so that kind of ruins the reputation for other Dracos on the market. And reason number 2, a lot of aspiring astrologers like to launch bullets to the moon because they watch too many music videos on YouTube that show this gun off. With all that negativity aside, I can't argue with the facts that this is a unique and probably fun gun to shoot with the boys in the endless swamps of Mississippi. Next on the chopping block is the Show Me State, Missouri, which is the latest state to adopt an official state firearm. On July 6, 2023, the muzzle-loading Hawken rifle was made the official rifle of Missouri. The Hawken rifle was manufactured by Jacob and Samuel Hawken out of their own shop in St. Louis, Missouri, in the early 1820s. It was popular with most professions heading west like fur trappers and hunters, mainly thanks to its accuracy, knockdown power, and it being lightweight. Something unique about the Hawken rifle is that some of the models came with 2 triggers, which activating one would make the trigger pull on the other trigger very light. Only around 1,000-ish were made since each were self-manufactured by the brothers, but thankfully you still see a lot of reproductions floating around. Overall, the Hawkins rifle is a pretty great pick for the state of Missouri, and it would be difficult for me to choose something better. Okay, we've finally reached the last state that starts with the letter M, which is the state of Montana. My pick for Montana was pretty easy to find. All I had to do was look into what firearm was commonly used in skirmishes between the federal government and Native Americans, and the answer would fall into my lap, which it instantly did. The Springfield Model 1873 was the standard issue rifle for the Army from 1873 to 1903 and was used by troops and natives significantly during the Indian Wars, with Montana being a major setting in that conflict. with battles such as the Battle of the Little Bighorn. The Springfield Model 1873 was a simple breech-loading single-shot rifle chambered in .45-70, which was able to bring down man or beast with reliable and accurate shots. In my opinion, this gem of a firearm should be widely recognized as an icon for such a bloody, yet historic time in Montana's history. Okay, enough about Montana, let's move on to Nebraska. There's not a lot of angles to find a unique firearm for this state, so I guess I might as well give you guys the Ruger 1022 since I know I'm going to get several comments if I didn't mention it somewhere in this video. If you're new to the gun world, like under a rock new, the Ruger 1022 is often people's first experience with a firearm. The Ruger 1022 is a .22 caliber semi-auto that's accurate, reliable, and has several wallet-friendly models available. Because of its popularity, the 1022 accessory aftermarket is extensive, and you can really deck it out to your heart's desire. Hopefully that gives some of you gun newbies a brief idea of how beloved the Ruger 1022 is. Next state on the list is Nevada, and I instantly knew I had to pick a wheel gun to represent Nevada because A, revolvers are a quite popular choice for Nevadan ranchers, B, revolvers were common sidearms for casino mobsters, and C, my favorite gambling game, roulette. And with those reasons in mind, I think the Colt Police Positive fits that shoe pretty well. The Colt Police Positive is very underrated, despite Colt selling 3.25 million of them. This gem of a revolver was used by people of all walks of life, policemen obviously, but also used by ranchers, civilians, and early mobsters. Hell, even Al Capone possessed one. Yeah, I know this isn't the most glamorous choice like a Colt Python or some other famous piece, but hey, it was a wild card no one was expecting. The next state is New Hampshire. New Hampshire in the gun world is primarily known for two things: being the most pro-gun state in the eastern United States and being the home of Sig Sauer. With the latter in mind, I think the most influential firearm in Sig's lineup that doesn't catastrophically fail is the P365. The P365 is a 9mm subcompact pistol that caused the entire gun industry to rush out their own copycat to the market. So why did the P365 become a popular choice for everyday carriers? Well, it was simple, compact, modular, had great capacity, and was pretty darn reliable outside the first release window. The only thing I can really say negative about this firearm is that there is a little bit of hesitancy nowadays towards this gun, just based on the fact that SIG seemingly produces a separate gun that's just sketchy as hell. But even with that in mind, it's really hard to ignore the fact that this singular pistol changed the firearm industry overnight and should be recognized just on that alone. Next state is one you can smell a mile away: New Jersey. No, seriously, the smell is real, look it up. I was tempted to nominate that fake Sopranos gun, but lucky for you New Jerseyans, Samuel Colt founded Patton Arms Manufacturing Company in Paterson, New Jersey. This is where he began production on the Colt Patterson, the first commercial repeating revolver in the United States. Besides its trigger being absent until you cock the hammer back, it's a pretty standard black powder revolver with only 2,800 produced. Despite the limited amount manufactured and sold, it did find popularity with some Texas Rangers and some US Army troops during the Second Seminole War. Okay, enough about stinky New Jersey, let's move on to New Mexico. For New Mexico, I knew I had to choose a weapon featured in my favorite Sigma Edit series, Breaking Bad. And with that in mind, there was one particular gun that really emulates the feeling of being a New Mexico resident. And no, it's not the Sopranos gun, I promise. It's actually the Ruger LCR. The Ruger LCR is your run-of-the-mill, snub-nose revolver. It's a very niche choice for everyday carry, but it's probably the best and most cost-effective snub-nose on the market. But the main reason I picked it is I just think it's stylish and badass looking. Breaking Bad really makes this revolver menacing as hell, unlike in real life where it's laughed off as a range toy or a poor CCW choice. In short, I really see this as the gun for the modern cowboy in New Mexico who has to trek far and wide to pick up some gravy train at the Santa Fe Walmart. Next is the state of New York, and since it's the historic home of Remington, you really have no other choice than to nominate the Remington 870. It is the most well-known shotgun in the world, hundreds of models to choose from, pretty insane aftermarket support, it's affordable, and it just works. As long as you don't buy a new one. Hunters, policemen, soldiers, game wardens, campers, clay shooters, everyday Joes. It's definitely New York's and America's shotgun of choice. Moving on, North Carolina was the easiest state on the list when I learned Richard Jordan Gatling was a born resident of the state. By his last name alone, you already know what my pick is. The Gatling gun is a technical marvel, seen in many international conflicts back in the day, and even influential today thanks to Hollywood. I can probably say that's the most well-known machine gun besides the Thompson, so there's not a lot I can really say about it. The only complaint I will get from this pick is that the Gatling gun wasn't even produced in North Carolina, but this is the only way for me to slide this gem onto the list. Next state is one I actually really want to visit, North Dakota. I know it's surprising, but I don't think it's as boring as other people say it is. North Dakota is the only state in the country that introduced a bill to make a specific firearm a state symbol, and then fail. Back in early 2023, legislators tried to make the Winchester Model 1876 the official state firearm. However, it received mixed reception in some legislators' eyes, as they saw it as a gun used to decimate the buffalo population in North Dakota, which negatively affected Native Americans' livelihood at the time. So I guess it's up to me to find a realistic replacement that's mostly inoffensive. So I decided North Dakota's official firearm should come from the personal collection of its most famous resident, Theodore Roosevelt. So after a quick Google search, I found out he owned a custom-built Springfield 1903 for hunting, so he's unironically a FUD. The Springfield 1903 is most well known as the US military's standard issue rifle for half a century. Springfield Armory and several other manufacturers pumped out around 3 million of these bad boys, and long story short, it was a decent, powerful bolt action that unsurprisingly oversaturated the battlefields of World War I and even World War II. So if North Dakota legislators want another shot at getting an official firearm for their state, I would recommend the Springfield 1903 or something just as inoffensive. 6-7. Riz, The Gritty, Jake Paul, The Grimace Shake, Italian Brain Rot, Hawk Tua, The Browns, all originating from the state of Ohio. So it shouldn't be shocking whatsoever when I nominate a meme gun to represent the meme state. And the gun in question is the H-Car. Yeah, I bet you dummies thought I was going to say the Yeet Cannon. The Ohio Ordnance H-Car is a modernized Browning bar that looks like this. This modern monstrosity is chambered in 30-06 and goes for around $7,000. This is the stupidest gun I've ever seen in every aspect. One please. Okay, time to skedaddle out of Ohio because I don't want to get eaten by Grimace. So the next state up is Oklahoma. And I've got nothing. Oklahoma to me is too similar to Texas in a lot of ways. Like, I really can't tell the difference between their versions of barbecue. So once again, one of my viewers is going to bail me out. Okay, let's see who's from Oklahoma. Connor Dingus suggests the tourist judge for Oklahoma. Don't even joke about this, dude. You're going to give your grandpa too many ideas. Okay, anyone else? DJ Angel 8166 suggests any AR-15 with a Rise ornament trigger. I actually didn't know Rise was based out of Oklahoma. The more you know. Honestly, I think DJ Angel is onto something. I've always seen Oklahoma as that unremarkable southern gun nut state. But unremarkable doesn't mean terrible whatsoever, just like the generic black rifle of America, the AR-15. Yeah, I get that a lot of gun owners are feeling the fatigue of the whole industry revolving around a design that's been around for 3/4 of a century, but we all understand why. The AR-15 is the American Swiss Army knife of the gun world. There's one for every price point and niche. So yeah, I gotta agree with DJ Angel. The AR-15 should be the official firearm of Oklahoma. And before I move on to the next state, I gotta mention that Oklahoma Panhandle because you guys seem to enjoy it. Okay, the next state is another neighbor of mine, Oregon. I probably should have nominated the Kimber 1911 for this state instead of Alabama. But I'm actually kind of glad though I didn't because another viewer's suggestion felt like the right pick for the Beaver state. And that weapon was the Mosin Nagant. If you don't know, the Mosin was the mass-produced standard-issue bolt-action rifle for the Russian Empire and its successor, the Soviet Union, with over 30 million models produced. This singular rifle has probably seen the most amount of war, from the Russo-Japanese War all the way up to even today, with the current war in Ukraine. This rifle just refuses to die. Despite people calling it a garbage rod and not as polished as other military surplus rifles on the market, I do have a soft spot for the Mosin, since it was my first rifle. Gone are the days when you could pick up a crate of nugs for a couple $100, but even today it's still a pretty fun rifle to slug around and plink. Great, now I have a sudden urge to get lost in the rugged beaches and rainforests of Oregon with this bulky rifle slung on my back. Next state up is Rhode Island, and I knew this state would be a tricky one. Not a lot of local firearm manufacturers because it's a small state, land and population wise, so I thought I would have to resort to choosing some gun from Family Guy. But after a couple dead ends, I've actually managed to find something pretty intriguing that's beloved by its residents, the Gettysburg gun. But here's the thing, the Gettysburg gun isn't a firearm at all. It's a Napoleon-type cannon with a cannonball stuck right at the entrance of the muzzle. The Cliff Notes version of how it ended up disabled is that during the Battle of Gettysburg, an artillery battery from Rhode Island was in the middle of operating the cannon before they got shelled by the Confederates. The explosion ended up disfiguring the cannon enough for the ball to be permanently stuck. Its permanent home is at the Rhode Island State House in Providence, so if you're in the neighborhood, you should definitely check it out. Anyway, despite Rhode Island currently being hostile towards any pro-gun bill, I honestly think this gigantic paperweight would have a decent chance to become the official arm of the Ocean State. Okay, let's move on to the best Carolina there is, South Carolina. Originally for South Carolina, I was going to pick some random PSA gun to represent the state because PSA has really shaken up the entire firearm world. But the instant I saw FN US headquarters were in South Carolina, I instantly knew the FN SCAR felt like the right choice. The FN SCAR, despite being completely overpriced, is one of my dream guns ever since Modern Warfare 2. The FN SCAR line of rifles since 2009 have found moderate success from militaries around the globe and even in the civilian market when people could actually afford them. FN, lower the price of them, you schmucks. Anyway, getting back on topic, FN actually manufactures the military version of the SCAR right in South Carolina, which is good enough in my book to make it South Carolina's official firearm. But the real question is, which specific model should represent South Carolina? If it was up to me, it would probably be the SCAR 17 or the military equivalent just because I'm a sucker for 308, but any SCAR would be just fine. Shifting gears, the next state is one I really want to visit, South Dakota. There's a lot on my bucket list in South Dakota, like the Wall Drug, Mount Rushmore, the Black Hills, and especially Deadwood. Deadwood, despite being a little bit of a tourist trap nowadays, has a lot of history and attractions that are very appealing to me. Probably the most interesting piece of lore is that this is where lawman Wild Bill Hickok was gunned down on August 2nd, 1876 by Jack McCall while playing cards. Also, fun fact, his supposed hand of cards he died with was later dubbed Dead Man's Hand. I've heard the term before, but admittedly I didn't know where it came from. Anyway, Hickok owned a variety of firearms, but the only one you can find in Deadwood is his 1860 Colt Army conversion revolver, being displayed at Adams Museum. It isn't the gun he died with or even the one of his famous Colt 1851s, but still pretty neat to see it in a place Hickok actually resided for a bit, and I think it's cool enough for my unofficial pick for South Dakota. Okay, Tennessee has by far the funniest official firearm on the list. On February 29, 2016, Governor Bill Haslam signed HJR 0231 into law, designating the Barrett Model M82 as the state's official firearm. Yes, that Barrett, the 50 cal semi-auto anti-material rifle used by dozens of countries around the world, produced right in the heart of Tennessee in the small town of Christiana. Honestly, really surprised that this resolution passed at all, so it gives me some hope that some of my wilder picks I've shown off in this video could be plausible. I can confidently guess that you Tennesseans are pretty smug having this as your official rifle. Okay, onto the state a lot of you have been waiting for, and the state guaranteed to already have an official state firearm, Texas. What you may have not known is that they've only had an official state firearm since 2021, and that gun happens to be the Colt Walker, designed by the famous Texas resident Samuel Colt in collaboration with Texas Ranger Samuel Walker. It's one of the most influential pistols in history. It was the first viable black powder 6-shooter in existence, and despite its limited production, it's still heavily associated with the Mexican-American War and that independent spirit every Texan has. Its power in literal and historical sense made it a no-brainer for Texas legislators to appoint this gun as the official state firearm of Texas. Okay, next is Utah, the home of dirty sodas, goblins, and famous firearm inventor John Moses Browning. John's influence on the history of firearms is overwhelming, and to this very day, you still see remnants of his timeless designs in modern firearms. Even today, his own creations are still popular among militaries and civilians, like the High Power, the M2 Browning, and most importantly, the M1911, which Utah designated as their own official firearm in 2011, also becoming the first state to adopt a firearm as an official state symbol. I think we all know why the 1911 is beloved. Nothing is stronger than 45 ACP, which has the stopping power to take down an elephant, 2 world wars, and a durable metal frame. None of that polymer crap. Jokes aside, the 1911 is still a decent firearm in today's world. I feel like even the biggest 1911 naysayers know that this firearm is rightfully recognized by Utah as historically and culturally relevant enough to become a state symbol. Okay, moving on, we got another tricky state, Vermont. Vermont's really only known for a couple of things like Bernie Sanders, maple syrup, Ben & Jerry's. Legit paradise if you like any of those things. But back on topic, there's not a lot of firearm manufacturers in Vermont, so finding a candidate wasn't too hard, but it wasn't easy. And my candidate is the Wasser 10. The Wasser 10 is a Romanian AKM, well known for being a great first step in the world of AKs for a reasonable price. Well, that last part is debatable nowadays. Century Arms is their most famous importer, and they were founded in Vermont, so hey, I got some ground to stand on. Yeah, it's not the prettiest rifle like an Arsenal, but hey, it should be Vermont's very own rifle. Ah, Virginia, home of Chris Chan and wine-sipping moms trying to make another East Coast state a gun-free zone. Okay, let's not doom and gloom. What did I pick to represent Virginia? Well, I decided on the Chris Vector, a very well-known SMG with a unique delayed blowback design that directs the bolt downwards, effectively reducing recoil. I mainly chose the Vector for 2 reasons. Well, one, it's produced at Chris USA's headquarters located in Chesapeake, Virginia, something I did not know before writing the script of this video. And number 2, it was one of my favorite SMGs to use in Black Ops 2. Yeah, I know, very biased reasoning, but I just know if I was a Virginian resident, I would be mighty proud if this SMG was my state's official firearm. I hope you Virginia bros snag this gun real quick, because I'll be honest, it's not looking so good. But do you want to know another state that doesn't look so good? Washington. Washington's gun laws are just reaching rock bottom at this point, which is a shame because Washington has some of the most beautiful landscapes in the entire nation. However, most of these landscapes aren't a walk through the park. So taking a gun on your journey feels like a core part to explore the heart of Washington. So for my nominee, I wanted to stick to some type of semi-auto that just skirted around Washington's laws without making the gun look like some commie gobbledygook. So that basically left me with one obvious choice, the Ruger Mini 14. Yes, I know the Mini 14 of old wasn't the greatest gun ever, specifically in the accuracy department, but 2003 onwards, Ruger has noticeably improved the design. Most gun tubers will probably tell you that the Ruger Mini 14 at minimum is a niche side grade to your standard AR-15 build, but when half your competition is effectively banned, it's a godsend to own. Plus, the 223 is a pretty versatile round, great option for home defense, and probably a decent choice against wildlife, as long as you pack some bear spray just in case. In conclusion, the Mini 14 is an all-around versatile rifle that should be recognized by the evergreen state. Okay, next we have the last official state firearm in this video, from the state of West Virginia. The Hall Model 1819 Flintlock rifle was chosen as the Mountain State's official firearm in 2013. Produced in Harpers Ferry, West Virginia from the 1820s to the 1840s, the Hall Model 1819 is a flintlock rifle that was designed by John Hall and was adopted by the US military. However, only 20,000 were produced, and the costs were too high to arm most men with it. Supposedly, it's also among the first or possibly the first machine-produced firearm, though I couldn't find too much about that besides a politician's brief comment. Either way, it's a technical marvel compared to muskets at the time, and well deserving of being West Virginia's official firearm. Cheeseheads should rejoice because Wisconsin is finally up next. I was tempted to nominate a Henry product since they're headquartered here, but I feel like this video has enough lever action rifles. So after brainstorming for 30 seconds, I decided to pick the cheesiest gun to represent Wisconsin, and there isn't a better candidate than the High Point C9. If you don't know, this is probably the most memed firearm in existence. Why is it memed on? Well, besides a model literally being called the Yeet Cannon, I mean just look at the pistol. It looks ugly, bulky, and cheap. but despite its pretty noticeable downsides, its reliability and performance as of recent years has been pretty decent considering it hovers around the $130 price tag. This is as cheap as a pistol can get before you get really problematic reliability issues, and I think that deserves some recognition. Also, High Point as a company is a very vocal Second Amendment supporter, so that's gotta count for something too. So anyway, if you have a problem with the C9 representing Wisconsin, by all means just switch this pick out with the Henry Golden Boy, but I think a lot of you think the C9 is rightfully the cheesier choice. Okay, last state on the list, Wyoming. Per capita, Wyoming has the largest number of hunters compared to any other state. On top of that, Wyoming's diverse game to choose from further cements the state as one of the greatest states for hunters, so I guess it's up to me to find that perfect Wyoming hunting gun to represent the state. In just a couple minutes of digging, I came up with my answer, the Bighorn Armory Model 89. Manufactured in-state and chambered in 500 Smith & Wesson, this rifle can literally take down any game found in Wyoming. I think the only criticism I'm going to get is that this is kind of a boutique gun. The price reflects this very clearly. So if you think this is just some gimmick gun, by all means just replace this with the Winchester Model 1873, aka the gun that won the West. But I honestly think the Model 89 perfectly represents Wyoming. Well, that was the last of the states, but I'm not done yet. We still have the territories and commonwealths of the United States to go over. I know that a lot of these places on the surface don't have a rich firearm history. However, I did some research and found some decent firearms that would do a good enough job representing them if given the chance. So I'm not going to waste another minute, let's just get into them. First territory up is American Samoa. After doing a little digging and stretching the definition of what we see as a firearm, it wasn't too hard to nominate the Blunt's Point naval gun. This nomination is technically a National Historic Landmark. This landmark contains two 150mm naval guns that were built on Matatutu Ridge in 1942, in response to Pearl Harbor and further fortifying the Pago Pago Harbor. These naval guns are still in great shape after 100 years, despite being surrounded by a pool of water that probably contains brain-eating amoebas. But other than that, I think it's a decent choice for American Samoa. Moving forward, Guam is mostly known as that island that can supposedly tip over, and it hosting a strategically important military naval bases that cover the Indo-Pacific Ocean area. So since Guam's identity for the past 100 years has been tied to military defense, I finally have an excuse to include the M1 Garand as an official symbol. The M1 Garand doesn't really need any introductions. Everyone knows the standard issue 30-06 pinging rifle. The thing you may or may not know was that Guam was invaded by the Japanese during World War II and later had to be recaptured. Both events were dubbed the Battle of Guam. So during both of these battles, the M1 Garand was extensively used by the Marines and Navy soldiers since it was the standard issue rifle. But one more cool thing to tie the M1 Garand to Guam's history is that in 1996, the Guam Police Department traded 30 M1 Garands to a mainland FFL that were confirmed to be used on the battlefield. The Guam police got upgraded gear and in exchange the FFL literally struck gold. Why did the police just not auction the weapons themselves? I don't know. But anyway, I'll link the article about the Guam Garands because I think it's an interesting read. But anyway, I think the M1 Garand was meant for Guam. Okay, if one of you guys had a Nerf sword to my neck telling me to name all the US territories, I'd probably forget to name the Northern Mariana Islands. This small commonwealth only has around 52,000 residents, and they're also the youngest territory, officially joining the US in 1978. My choice for the islands is actually a gun you can find abandoned. Just like Guam, the Northern Mariana Islands were crucial to the Japanese during and before World War II. The Absolute National Defense Zone was a chain of island territories that were used as a buffer from mainland attacks. So it isn't that shocking that there were heavy fortifications on these islands, and some to this day are intact. So with that in mind, my unofficial pick for the Northern Mariana Islands is an abandoned Japanese coastal defense gun emplacement on the island of Rota, which happens to already be part of the US National Register of Historic Places. Specifically, this gun is a camouflaged 140mm Model 3 built into a cozy cliffside 101 years ago. I doubt I will ever make the trek to this mammoth of a gun, mainly because how the hell do I even get there without going bankrupt? Moving on to the next territory, It's kinda sad the only reason people know that the US Virgin Islands exist is because of one very specific individual who owned an island there, and to set the record straight, that was a different Bubba. Anyway, the US Virgin Islands is a very well-known tourist hotspot and made me ponder, ignoring all the gun laws, what firearm would I carry in a tropical paradise? For me, I really don't want something very heavy to weigh you down in the sand, so there goes most long guns and most full-size handguns. Most definitely I want nothing to do with wood grips, so no broom handle. So that just leaves me with 1,000 tiny pistols to choose from. Great. Well, if you're going to waste away in paradise and lose all your money at some beachside casino, you might as well do it in style and have a classy pistol like a Walther PPK on you. Walther has been producing the PPK since 1942, being a rather simple, short, and quality-built firearm. Sadly, age has caught up to this design, and it's mostly seen as an obsolete pick for everyday carry. So you may be asking, why in the hell would someone carry this? Well, my reasons for carrying one are kinda funny. For me, the James Bond LARP looks quite dashing. And on top of that, you know where Bond constantly frequents in his films? Beach resorts. I feel like my reasonings are bulletproof enough for making the Walther PPK the official firearm for the US Virgin Islands. Well, that was all the territories, but let's quickly add Washington, D.C. And the firearm that should represent our prized capital is the Brown Bess musket. Also known as the land pattern musket, the Brown Bess musket was the standard issue black powder rifle for the British Army for over a century. But most importantly, it was also used by the American colonists against the British during the Revolutionary War. It's not even a stretch to say this gun literally helped found America as we know it. Nothing else to really add besides that it would be a crime not to make this Washington, D.C.'s official rifle.
Hold it!
A million of you are probably collectively screeching that I missed Puerto Rico, and you're absolutely right. I shit you not, I was just about to export this video, but then my gut was telling me I made some type of critical mistake. That would have been soul crushing to have to take down the video and redo it. So with that crisis averted, what gun did I pick to represent Puerto Rico? Well, I decided the Spanish cannons located at the historic El Morro Citadel and Fortress looked sick enough. These cannons have survived multiple centuries guarding the San Juan Bay, from pirates, European rivals, to even American naval ships during the Spanish-American War. You really can't find a more historic arrangement of cannons in Puerto Rico, and their home fortress just looks incredible to explore. I didn't know a damn thing about El Morro before making this video. Now I want to make the trek there someday. Well, this video took longer than expected, but it's finally out. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. I know some of my picks are going to be divisive or just strange, but hey, the world of firearm designs is a bit strange too. Remember that this video shouldn't be taken as the gospel, that disagreeing with any of my picks is okay. You probably know your state more than I do. But I think we can all agree that in the end, it would be nice to see more states come out of the woodworks and celebrate the historical, cultural, and technical marvels of the firearm world. Thank you all for tuning in, and until next time, this is Wubba Bubba, signing off again.